Hey guys, what is going on? It is me, BakuriBox12 here, and welcome back to another Realm of the Mad God ranking video. Having spoken about weapons, abilities, and armors up to this point, it's time to finish up our journey across the inventory screen with rings and accessory items. This is where Realm has the most customization out of any other category, because you have a chance to mix and match a whole bunch of numbers from 8 different stats across 15 different classes. It's a lot of fun to pick and choose from this massive pool of items, and it's for that reason that I found this list to be the most difficult to make so far. While I pretty much already knew what my top 5 or 10 were going to be, everything after that point was pretty up in the air. Anyone who's played this game for a long time will tell you that you kind of have your comfort zone of items that you like to pick from. You sort of have the same gear that you put on classes when you make one, and I'm pretty much the same way. Whenever I make a new character, it's either a pyramid ring or a health ring. Not necessarily because it's the best ring for the class, but because it's good enough. It's what I'm used to. It's the item that I usually put on my classes. You know, why fix what isn't broken? But by making this video, it really gave me a chance to look for and appreciate what a lot of these other rings do. And I was able to realize that a lot of these are actually pretty similar to the rings that I already use a lot. And while they may be slightly inferior in areas, they also have their own identity and their own special mix of stats. So just as a heads up, once we get past like the first 10 items, everything is pretty close. Like before, I'm only looking at the untiered and set-tiered items. Also no limited time special rings like the medals, nor any reskins, which does unfortunately include the Ring of Decades, since it is just a slightly better unbound health. So let's get started. Number 32, we're kicking it off with the Spider's Eye Ring. A classic item here, dropping from Arachna, the Spider Queen, that every new player will probably encounter a couple of times. It grants you 3 vitality and 3 wisdom. In the era of pets, these stats are kind of seen as the inferior ones, but not half bad for early game. It can be a somewhat decent swap out for new players who want to regenerate their health faster. It does affect your Wiz mod for priests, sorcerers, and necros fairly well, but at the end of the day, it's a UT item that doesn't drop in a white bag from a very low tier dungeon, so it's expected to not be very good. Number 31, Crystal Bone Ring. This item gives you 3 dexterity and 3 wisdom. Slightly different from Spider Eye. We're trading out vitality for dexterity, which I think is a bit more desirable. DPS in exchange for regen I think is usually more helpful, and we're still getting that helpful Wiz mod. Number 30, Fairy Ring. A slightly more ambitious attempt at a balanced ring. We have 2 speed, dex, Vit, and Wisdom, 4 different stats in total this time, which is more than the previous rings. But it's one of those cases where you're getting so little of each stat to where, unless you combine it with a lot of other things, you're not really gonna notice. Number 29, Snake Eye Ring. Another early game item that I do see frequently whenever I run Snake Pits. We're getting 3 attack this time and 3 speed, keeping in theme with the Snake Pit since it drops a speed pot. And when it comes to DPS, attack typically is more beneficial than dexterity. It depends on the class and what buff you have, of course, but 3 attack on its own isn't actually half bad. It's just one under a pyramid ring if you want to think about it that way. Number 28, Ring of Pure Wishes. Our first ST ring so far, in one of the earlier sets, we get a small increase of 10 health, 10 mana, 1 attack, and 5 defense. If it wasn't for that 5 def, it probably would be at the bottom. But with it, it does give you reasonable protection for such a low-grade ST ring, because aside from that, it's pretty minor in its effectiveness. Number 27, Ring of Divine Faith. A direct upgrade from the Spider's Eye Ring. Dropping in the Manor of Immortals, we're getting 5 vitality and 5 wisdom, which perfectly complements the rest of the UT Manor set. It may only actually be 2 stats higher than the Spider's Eye Ring, but when we're splitting hairs like this, you kind of have to draw a line between what is too little and what is just right. And for me, 3 of 1 stat is pretty low, but 4 and 5 is a number I'm comfortable with. And while this isn't something that I find myself using ever, unless again I'm wearing the whole set, not only is it pretty decent feed power, but I could see this being a pretty good swap out for newer players, those who don't have high regeneration or good pets. In addition, the 5 wisdom is also a good complement for regenerating mana, as well as the inherent wisdom modification to make your abilities more potent. Number 26, the Forgotten Ring. Everybody's favorite shatters drop, we're getting 20 health, 10 mana, 3 attack, and 2 defense. While it doesn't give you the vitality and wisdom buff of the Ring of Divine Faith, it does however provide what I consider more universally favorable stats. The health and mana is very minimal again, better than Pure Wishes, but not by much. It's the 3 attack and 2 defense that really sets this ring above the rest. 3 attack, as I said, like with the Snake Eye Ring, is only 1 less than Pyramid, and the 2 defense is a nice slight boost to this item's credibility. Number 25, Akuma's Tear. One of our newest entries, we have 30 health and 40 mana, the most we've seen so far, and 1 dexterity point. Close, we were really close to having a halfway decent item here. The health and mana were starting to get up there, it's better than what we've had before, but it's not complemented by any other stat. 1 dex is really nothing. At the very least, it does provide more protection than the previous rings. Number 25, Amulet of Dispersion. Boy, does this thing have some history behind it. For all the new guys watching, this item was originally known as the Amulet of Resurrection, an item that, if you were ever to die, would break if you were wearing it, and you would automatically be teleported to the Nexus alive. It was an incredibly powerful and highly sought-after item that you could only get by purchasing it in the Nexus for 11,500 fame. Eventually though, because of this game's coding and because players love to cheat, duping absolutely ruined its value. Eventually Kabam stepped in and changed it to the Cursed Amulet of Resurrection, meaning it was like a 90% chance to come back but a 10% to actually die, so it wasn't guaranteed anymore. But they were selling them for like 1,000 fame in the Nexus, so it was still very much worth it to buy them and stockpile. Then they lowered it even more because they realized that that wasn't good and changed it to the Cursed Amulet of Zombification. So instead of resurrecting, you would die but come back as a zombie who would run around and attack players, which funny enough is the closest thing we've ever had to actual PvP in the game. Very strange time in Realm. And then they just completely nullified the resurrection part of it. Had this black center for the longest time and then it started dropping in the Haunted Cemetery. And now it's known as the Amulet of Dispersion, granting the wearer 30 health and mana and 1 point of every other stat, making this in some ways the first Omnipotence Ring, just, to a much lesser extent. And unfortunately, like with the Fairy Ring, a single stat point for all of them, while having good intentions, doesn't really do a whole lot. Number 23, Spectral Ring of Horrors. Also dropping from the Haunted Cemetery, we get 25 health, -2 speed, but +4 dexterity, vitality, and wisdom. Not quite as much of a health bonus as the Amulet or Akuma's Tear, no mana bonus of any kind either, and -2 speed is a bit of a bummer, but getting 4 points of 3 different stats isn't half bad. Dexterity increases your DPS, vitality is good for early game regen, and 4 wisdom is good for early game mana regen, as well as Wismod. Number 22, Candy Ring. Shoutouts to when this was originally called the Ring Pop. This is where the accessories start to get a bit more fun. We're getting 10 vitality and 10 speed, but losing 100 mana and 10 wisdom. Quite a big and significant trade-off. You get this really high health regen and good boost to your movement speed, but you can't use your ability nearly as much, so it's not advised for robe classes. But I really like how they kept this in tune with the idea of an actual candy ring. When you have a sugar rush, you have this quick burst of energy. You're really fast and frenetic, but at the same time, you lose concentration. You can't slow down to think. In other words, you become less intelligent, less wise. At the end of the day, even if you don't like the trade-off, it is a pretty good swap out for rushing, as long as you're not relying on your ability for said rushing. Number 21, Captain's Ring. Okay, now we're starting to get somewhere. 40 health, 3 attack, and 3 dexterity. The biggest health bonus we've had so far, and 3 attack and dex are good complements to each other. It was a good idea to combine them here. Number 20, Honey Circlet. While it bears a very strong resemblance to an item we're going to see later up here, this is a pretty solid ST ring across the board. 40 health and mana is good, further complemented by 4 dexterity and 4 speed, improving both your movement capabilities as well as your rate of fire. While Candy Ring is fun and Divine Faith could be used as a swap out in some scenarios, this is the first ring that I really think could be used at all times. Number 19, Amulet of Drakefire. Finally, an item that boasts an extraordinary amount of a single stat. We have 115 health and 5 speed, the most of either that we've seen. If health is your major concern, yes, you could throw on something more powerful, Unbound, Exalted, Para even, but it trades out a large amount of health in exchange for speed for those classes that just so happen to want to rush more. And it could honestly go on anything. Health is not bad on a single class. And the 5 speed can either bring up some of these slower classes that maybe want to boost, or push up those rushing classes even further. This amulet has some options. Number 18, Coral Ring. Something I underestimated for a long time, because dang, it's not a sea silk. But when further inspecting its stats, it actually is pretty good. It has its moments. 75 wisdom, 75 wisdom, geez. 75 mana, 5 wisdom, and 5 speed. Pretty good on sorcerers. You can increase that base 60 speed even higher. Wisdom is great on that class. Knights as well get almost an additional stun. It's not for everybody, definitely not, but for what it's worth, it has more uses than I gave it credit for. Feed power's pretty good too. Number 17, Interregnum or Interregnum. Oddly enough, we're actually getting the same number of stats as the Coral Ring, just on different stats. Instead of 75 mana, 75 health. Instead of wisdom, vitality. Instead of speed, attack. And for me, the 3 main stats I always like to see an increase of are health, attack, and defense. And this ring just so happens to satisfy 2 of those conditions. But I've learned to not cast aside vitality like I used to. In the cases that I decide to not play with a pet, which is exhilarating and fun and a nice blast from the past, but also anytime I get pet stasis, it still comes in handy. Overall though, it's a relatively balanced ring with a focus on a little bit of defense and offense. Number 16, Horrific Claws. Similar things are happening here with a 40 HP increase, not as much as before, but a 50 mana increase, which I think is a worthy trade-off. But 5 speed over vitality, which I prefer, prefer, although minus 3 dexterity, so that 5 attack won't be as effective as if you used an Interregnum. However, we are getting a hefty bonus to 4 pretty valuable stats, as opposed to the previous ring with an equally hefty bonus to only 2 stats, and a third wheel vitality buff. Number 15, Rusty Cuffs. While I'm bummed out that we're not getting an attack bonus this time, we're still getting 70 health, 5 defense, further complementing the protection of this ring, as well as 5 speed again, which is technically a defensive stat, as it allows you to dodge more effectively, as well as get from point A to point B quicker. Again, it's a good ring for pretty much any class, not the best, but it's up there. Especially for an ST accessory, it's easily one of the best. Number 14, Ring of the Sphinx. The butt of every joke, but I like it. Yeah, it's the worst of the tomb rings, but like the coral ring, I think it has its moments. 100 MP is a good bonus for any of those classes that have a really good ability. Not just the mana-heavy classes like Sorcerer, Necro, Priest, but also Knights. It gives them exactly 1 additional stun. Samurais too, I could even see this working on. 4 Wisdom to complement that mana, not bad, as well as 4 Dexterity. Kinda lost in translation, doesn't exactly relate to the other 2 stats, but it's a bonus, I'll take it. Oh, and the Assassin, how could I forget? Anytime you see a ring that gives you an absurd mana bonus, it was made for the Assassin. Number 13, Experimental Ring. Often shortened to Expo, this ring gives you 60 health and mana, the highest balance of HP and MP so far. 4 defense, always good, and 4 vitality, which is kind of seen as the weakest link. That being said, it is still quite good. Number 12, Geb's Ring of Wisdom. It definitely takes its name very literally, as this ring provides you the biggest wisdom bonus of any ring, even beating out the Unbound Wisdom. 25 health and 25 mana, it's alright. 5 vitality, okay, like Ring of Divine Faith, it does complement the rest of the Geb set, but that 10 wisdom is what makes this ring so good. Priest, Necro, and Sorcerer are the 3 classes that you will see wearing this ring. Sure, it's not a go-to for every class in the game, in fact, only a few classes really benefit from it, but where it shines bright. And that deserves credit. Number 11, Ring of the Covetous Heart. I didn't want to believe it, but this is basically just a better Ring of Geb. Not in the same way, mind you, but for different reasons. It's just got more going on. Only 15 HP, which is less, but 50 mana, twice as much as Geb. 5 attack, which we weren't getting at all, and 8 wisdom, only 2 shy of before. When I look at this ring, I see that we're trading out 10 health and 2 wisdom, very small amounts of each, for 25 more mana and 5 whole attack that we didn't have. To me, that is way worth it. Number 10, Ring of the Nile. While technically only 20 health and mana better than the Honey Circlet, it is 10 whole places above it. This is what I meant by these items being very neck and neck. Although to be fair, I am quite swayed by the beauty of this ring. I love the turquoise hue. Like with Expo, we're getting 60 health and mana, always good, but 4 speed and 4 dexterity, which, like with the Honey Circlet, is a good boost to your overall movement capabilities. Not as focused as some of the aforementioned items, but for me it is a classic and go-to that I've been using for years. Number 9. Hivemind Circlet. They don't even try to hide that this was made for the Assassin. They slapped that right on the Flesh Collector set. 100 mana, 5 attack, 5 wisdom, and minus 2 vid. Honestly, when you look at it closely, it's not very different from the Sphinx ring. You're still getting 100 mana, 5 wisdom as opposed to 4, but that 5 attack is such a saving grace. This has become one of my new favorite rings to put on those mana-heavy classes that can still retain their power. Number 8. Magical Lodestone. If the Ring of the Sphinx is the laughingstock of the tomb, then the Magical Lodestone, or Potato as it's been called, is the one for the Lost Halls. And really for no other good reason than it doesn't give health. The way I see it, we're getting a very significant boost of 6 points to 4 of the main stats. Attack and Dex already, to me, makes this worth it. Big boost to your DPS no matter what class you're playing. Also, defense and speed, not only allowing you to take more damage, but allowing you to dodge more capably. And that golden sprite with an S on it, I don't know what it is, I really like it. Whether it's a potato or an egg yolk, either way, I'm hungry. Number 7. Bloodshed Ring. It's very similar to the Hivemind Circlet with a few switches. 100 health as opposed to mana, 5 defense instead of attack, and a maintaining of the 5 wisdom, making it a good pick for both mana-driven classes as well as health-driven. It's not as effective on mana classes as the Hivemind Circlet, but it gets the job done in a good way no matter what class you're playing. Health, defense, and wisdom I feel is rarely combined, and I like that change of pace. Number 6. Ring of the Pyramid. Easily one of the most commonly used rings by yours truly. It's a simple ring that gives 100 health, 4 defense, and 4 attack, balancing you out in terms of tankiness and raw damage. It's not extravagant, but it's solid. Number 5. Twilight Gemstone. It's basically a much better Sphinx ring, and an alternative to Hivemind. 110 mana, 6 defense, and 6 speed. All the same classes that have benefited from these types of rings before will benefit again. Knights, Assassins, Sorcerer, you know the drill. Number 4. Source Stone, often considered to be a direct upgrade from the Gemstone, and I would have to agree in most areas. We're still getting that 110 mana and 6 speed, but rather than the 6 defense, we're trading it out for another defensive stat in the form of 110 health, which in this day and age is often seen as way more effective than defense. Number 3. Bracer of the Guardian, one of the best items when it comes to balancing out my favorite stats. 60 health and mana, as per the norm, that's nothing new, but 6 attack and 6 defense. The health and defense complementing each other to allow you to take more hits, and the mana and attack allowing you to deal more damage, assuming your ability is something that causes damage in the first place. While it may look like a baseball glove to some, we know it's actually just the Infinity Gauntlet. Number 2. The Forgotten Crown. While it may not have the same balance as the Bracer, we're granted 110 health, like Source Stone, however 6 attack and dexterity, pushing your DPS through the roof, effectively combining both the Source Stone and Lodestone together in some way. Seeing as how some of my favorite classes are Wizard, Archer, and Ninja, maximizing those already high damage outputs is definitely on my list. And number 1, Omnipotence Ring. You say generic, I say perfectly balanced. I actually wasn't expecting to put this at number 1. I thought that the whole idea of trying to be the end-all be-all ring for every class would make it a tad unspecialized, and in ways it is, but when it comes down to it, this ring is great on every class in the game. 80 health and mana, so higher than Expo, Nile, Bracer, and +4 to all of the other 6 main stats. 4 attack, def, speed, dex, vit, and whiz. Automatically better than both Nile and Expo, and arguably better than Bracer and Crown for the sheer variety. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. Do you want the variety of everything, or do you want a ring that does one thing really well? In this case, I think it's the best ring in the game when thinking about the big picture, which is good because that's clearly what it tried to be, and that's why it's my favorite. But of course, that is just me. Please feel free to share what your favorite rings are down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, don't forget to check out the next episode whenever I post it, which will probably be soon. Alright. See ya.